sort of today, or what we need to realize, is that grade 12 analytical geometry now encompasses or incorporates circles. So we do circles in Euclidean geometry, but we also do circles in analytical geometry, where we look at properties like tangents to a circle. We look at properties such as, does a point lie inside a circle? Does it lie outside a circle? Do two circles intersect with each other? Do they touch each other? Do they lie within one another? And these are all things that we now start to learn and start to apply with our circle knowledge in analytical geometry. So we've learned about 4 formulas thus far. Panic, station. Right, those 4 formulas that we've learned about is your gradient formula. This is your gradient formula. I'll write this all down in a second. Your distance formula, your midpoint formula, and your angle of inclination. Right, you need to know, or you need to be able to identify these, because yes, you get them on your formula sheet, but if you don't actually know what it's for, then it's actually not useful in any shape, sense, or form. So those are the 4 formulas you know from grade 11. The formula that we're going to have a look at today, though, is this one down at the bottom. X minus a squared plus y minus b squared is equal to r squared. Okay, I see there's a question on the chat, so I'll get to that formula in a second. There's a question, can we use our circle knowledge from Euclidean and apply it to analytical geometry? Absolutely, Shimelo. We are actually going to do that in Wednesday's lesson. But yes, we're going to use knowledge that we already have from other sections of work, and we're going to apply it here. So absolutely. So start thinking about some of those circle theorems. And as I already mentioned, we will work a lot with tangents. So start thinking about those tangent theorems that you learned in Euclidean. Good connection. Well done. Okay, guys, can anyone tell me, or can anyone explain to me, what is this formula? This x minus a squared plus y minus b squared equals r squared. What is it? What does it represent? Give me something. Okay, so Flamelo said it helps us find the radius. Absolutely. Anything else? Okay, Boucher, exactly. It's the equation of the circle. And as Emmanuel says, it can help us find the center of the circle as well. Awesome, guys. Okay, so this A and B value that we have here, they tell us what the center of the circle is. Now, what we need to remember with this is that the signs are the opposite. So basically in our formula, we've got x minus a and y minus b. So that means my center is at positive a, positive b. So when you get given those brackets, if, for example, it was x minus 1 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals a radius, whatever that radius might be. If you were then looking for your center, the signs are the opposite of what they are in the bracket. So it's positive 1, negative 3. Okay, it's counterintuitive. And that's because of the minus in front of them. So that's how we can find the center. R squared represents the radius squared. So you can very easily just work out the length of your radius. You can then work out the length of your diameter. This could be potentially useful if you are in Euclidean geometry and working out lengths using Pythagoras and so on. So there's lots of applications for this across all sections. But essentially, this equation gives us the center of the circle, its coordinates, and the radius of the circle. Sorry, guys. This is what we call the center radius form of your equation. We also have our standard form, which is if you distributed all those brackets out and you just had x squared x, y squared y, plus or minus a constant, that would be your standard form. But the center radius form is the most useful form of our circle equation because it does give us this information about the center and about the radius. Okay, so we're going to do some very basic examples to start off with. just understanding what this all means. And then we are going to get into slightly more complex questions. Tlumelo, I see your question. Do you want me to show you what the general equation or what the general form would look like, or would you like an example of what it would look like? Sorry, I know that seems like a really stupid question, but what it would look like. Okay, cool. So I'm going to show you what it would look like in our example 3 that we're getting to. But for example, if I took this equation that I've written down here, this x squared, blah, 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 blah. If I distributed this out, this would be x squared minus 2x plus 1 plus y squared. Apparently not. Plus y squared plus 6y plus 9 equals 4. And then generally speaking, there's 2 ways that we would give it to you. Generally, we have the x terms together, the y terms together, and then we put the constants all on the right-hand side. So this would be minus 6, but I don't have to do it. I could have x squared minus 2x plus y squared plus 6y plus 6 equals 0. I could really put it in any situation that I wanted. All right, so Tlumelo, that's exactly what I've done here. So basically I've squared both of my brackets, and this is what your standard form of your circle looks like. It'll generally have an x squared term, an x term, a y squared term, a y term, and then your constant. Sometimes there is no x term, sometimes there is no y term. We'll talk about those in a second, but it's essentially just distribution. There is like a general form of it. I'm going to be honest, I never use it just because there's so many variables that you need to look at, and they don't actually mean anything. General form. Because the general form is actually not useful to us in any shape, sense, or form. So the general form, as I've written it here, can be written, like I say, in a general form of x squared plus y squared plus d of x plus e of y plus f equals 0. So d is your coefficient of x, y is your coefficient of y, f is your constant. But like I say, they don't actually mean anything. So I never actually even remember what it is because it's not a useful format for me. Pleasure. Okay, we will have a look at some examples using the standard form. Like I say, it's actually not a useful form to us, so we never actually really want to use it. We generally want to go from standard form to center radius form because that gives us useful information. Right, but we will get there. Let's have a look at our first examples. Let's make this a bit bigger so we can all see what's in here. Okay, it's a bit excessively big now, but anywho, here we are. Right. So all we want to do is write down the center and the radius of the following. Literally no thought process required whatsoever. We look at the equation and we write down what we want to write down. So we want the center and we want the radius. Radius. That's also not how you spell radius. Whoops. Okay. So center, you look at A, you look at B in your brackets, you use the opposite signs. +1, -3. Done. Radius, remember, according to my formula, x minus a squared plus y minus b squared, strange looking squared, equals r squared. This constant on the right-hand side represents your radius squared. So if you want just the radius, you square root it. So my radius here is 5 units. Literally no thought process required. Take the information, take it out, got what you want. Okay, now the reason this is so important is A, it gives you information about your circle, and B, a bit later on when we do start to look at going from standard form to center radius form, you need to know what information you've actually just found. You found the center and the radius. Right, so look at B for me. What is the center? What is the radius? You're welcome to unmute yourself, or you can just put in the chat. I don't really mind. So of the circle that I've given you here, x plus 2 squared plus y plus 9 squared equals 100. What is the center and what is the radius? Nice, guys. Sorry, there were so many messages that came in at once. Good centers and radius, radii. Good, Bongi and Kosi is already on the next one. Nice. Okay, so if we look at B, our center, -2, -9. Remember, opposite signs. Radius is square root of 100, so 10 units. You don't have to put units, you can just write 10. That's fine. I'm not super concerned about it. Right, if we look at C now, guys, what's different is that in the last two questions, we always had an x minus or plus something in our brackets. So there was always a binomial in our brackets being squared, but this time I just have an x squared. So that's different to what we are used to from the previous two examples. So Bongi and Kosi kind of already has it here, but what does it mean if we just have an x squared? What does it mean about the x coordinate of the center of my circle? Like I say, if you need a hint, go look at Bongi and Kosi's answer on the chat. So if you just have an x squared rather than a bracket of x plus or minus something squared, what does that mean about the x coordinate of your center? Nice, okay, guys. So you're looking at a 0 squared situation, or essentially boiling it down to the x coordinate is 0. So your center has an x coordinate of 0, and then according to that bracket with y, a y coordinate of 1. Our radius is 7 units. So anytime you see an x squared by itself or a y squared by itself, it means that that coordinate is just 0. This will make a little more sense as we get into it, but that's essentially all it means. Right. Actually, I don't know why I'm saying we'll get into this. Let's get into it now. If you think of what this means, if we had our x minus a squared plus y minus b squared, and we already know the radius is 49. If I told you the center was at the origin, and you substituted that in, it would be x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals 49. So what's going on here? X minus 0 is x, so it's just x squared. Y minus 0 is y, so it's just y squared. And so whenever you have a 0 in your center, it actually just simplifies or boils that whole bracket down to just the variable squared. Okay, so that's going to be quite helpful now when we go to question D. You just have x squared and y squared. So that means exactly as I've just put here, your center is at the origin at 0, 0. And your radius is 9 units long. Okay, now you don't obviously have to do all of this algebra that I did here. It's just important to understand why it's the case. So anytime you've got x squared and y squared, it just means that your coordinate for that specific variable is 0. Okay, so when we get to something like E, same thing. Your center is at 3, 0, because it's just, I don't know why I said y cubed there, that should be y squared, because it's just y squared. And your radius, again, don't overthink it. This represents r squared. So your radius is a square root of that value, exactly as we've been doing the entire time. Nothing's changed. Yes, it's now a third value, which isn't the nicest number to work with, but that's your radius. It's a square root of 30. Okay, so guys, understanding what your equation is actually telling you is very, very important. So if you want to take a screenshot of those first 5, do so. And then we're going to have a look at another example where I give you some information. We want to write down the equation. And like I said, we are getting to the complex stuff, but we need to understand the basics. Okay. So if we have a look at our second example here, it says determine the equation of the following circles. Now, generally, when we give you questions like this, we will say something along the lines of, whoops, in the form, and usually it's a center radius form, x minus a squared plus y minus b squared equals r squared. So generally, we tell you what form we want you to write it in, and 90% of the time, it is the center radius form. So for our first question here, we know where the center is. So we know it's x minus 2. Remember, the sign is always the opposite, squared, plus y plus 3 squared. And if our radius is 8 units, and this must represent r squared, we just square that, 64. We've got the equation of our circle. So again, don't overthink. Simple as that. Right, so when we now get to the next question, right? When we now get to our next question here, centered at the origin, we already know what that means. X squared plus y squared. Because I showed you, if you substituted in 0, 0, the brackets essentially, or the binomial in the brackets essentially falls away, and you just have x squared plus y squared. So it's centered at the origin. Our radius is 5 root 3, which means to get r squared, we would need to square 5 root 3. Now guys, just do that on your calculator. It's no need to be fancy. If you want to know why you get what you get on your calculator, remember this is a distributive law of exponents. So actually you're squaring 5 and you are squaring root 3. So you've got 5 squared, which is 25, times root 3 squared, which is 3, and 25 times 3 is 75. So if you go square it on your calculator, that's what you get. I would just do it on my calculator. You don't need to do it by hand like I've just done, but that's why you get what you get. Okay, now question C, a little different, because it says center at negative 5, 3, so we know what to do with that. Passing through a point. So there's nothing special about this point, except for the fact that it lies on the circle's circumference. So I would start by substituting in what I know. I know it's x plus 5 squared plus y minus 3 squared is equal to r squared. I don't know what my radius is. So what am I going to do to go and work out what r squared is? Nice, Lumelo. Anyone else got any suggestions? I can see what Lumelo said. I don't think the rest of you can. How are we going to find r squared? Nice, guys. Exactly. You sub in the point. Remember, in math, we don't give you useless information. You have used the center. That's done. It's in there. What we haven't used yet is the 3, 9. Use it. Substitute it in. So in place of x and y, we're going to substitute in those values. So 3 and 9. So we've got 3 plus 5 squared. Plus 9 minus 3 squared is equal to r squared. Now, guys, remember, you are looking for the equation of your circle. According to the equation of your circle, the value you are interested in is r squared, not r. I don't care what the radius is. For the purposes of this question that says determine the equation of the following, I don't care what r is. I care what r squared is. So when you now chuck this into your calculator, you get 3 plus 5 squared, which is 8 squared, so 64, plus 9 minus 3 squared, which is 36. 64 plus 36 is 100. So you get that 100 is equal to r squared. That's the value I care about. So now I can go and say that the equation of my circle is x plus 5 squared plus y minus 3 squared is equal to 100. If I had asked you, what is the radius of the circle, then you can tell me the radius is 10 units. But that wasn't what I asked. I asked you to find the equation of the circle. So there is no need for you to go and work out r squared and then basically do all the work again by squaring it. You've already got what r squared is. That's all you need. Okay, so just remember, if you are given information about the center, but not necessarily about the radius, but you know where the circle passes through, so you know a point that's on its circumference, just substitute in the point. You can go and find what r squared is. Okay, so let's take a screenshot of this. Excuse me. And then you're going to try some by yourselves. And then our next example is going to be sort of looking at what happens if we get it in standard form, but that's not what we want. We want to know the center, or we want to know the radius. How do we get it into our center radius form? Okay, so screenshots, and then I'm going to put up the questions I want you to have a try of. Okay. Okay, so these are the two questions I want you guys to try for me. Determine the equation of the circle centered at 1, -2, passing through the point -5, -2. And then determine the equation of the circle with center 3, 4, passing through the y-axis at 4. Just read it carefully, take in your information, let's see what we get. Okay, guys, when you're ready, just give me a thumbs up so that I know. I'm going to be honest, I did not look at the time when I said stop, so I've got no idea how much time I've given you. So just give me a thumbs up when you are done, please. I see a few thumbs up, not from everyone though. So I'm going to give you 1 more minute and then we'll have a look at the answers. Those of you that are done, awesome. Thank you. Okay, it seems like most of us are done. So let's have a look. Apparently not. It wants to stay hidden. There we go. Okay, so guys, nothing too tricky. The only thing that I'm going to point out is obviously in the last question, I was a bit cryptic and I said it passes through the y-axis at 4. So if it passes through the y-axis, you know your coordinate is at 0, 4. So that is what you're substituting in order to find the equation of your circle. Other than that, nothing complicated at all. Fill in your center information, substitute the point you know the circle passes through. Done. Okay, so if you want to take a screenshot, do so. And then, as I was saying, sometimes we get our equation of our circle in standard form, but that's not helpful. Okay, it's just some x squared, y squared, it's not helpful to us. We want to be able to put it into the center radius form so that we know information about our circle. How long is the radius? Where is the center? And as you can see, what we essentially need to do there is we need to complete the square. Now, I know completing the square is not everyone's favorite thing in the world, but actually it's so easy. Sorry, I need to just... Some textbooks make it extremely complicated to complete the square. And honestly, when you get down to it, it really is not hard. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I complete the square. I think it's very easy. I must be honest, I hated with a passion completing the square. I hated teaching it. Whenever I saw it come up, I was like, nope. But now that I'm comfortable with it, easy game. So I'm going to show you how I do it. If you don't like the way I do it, or if you find the way that you do it easier, awesome. You do that. Okay. Sorry, there's just a question of, yeah, sorry, Bongi and Corsi, why is it, so when you substitute, why is it your English? Okay, I'm going to read the question. Ma'am, why is y, so the 4, negative when I substitute it? It should not be. So it should be positive 4. So let's correct this, positive 4, which means that it is, okay, 16 is really stuck with us here, which means that 9 is equal to r squared. And so r, so your equation should be equal to 9. I do apologize. Thank you for picking up on that. I don't know why I did that, because I know for a fact when I did this question, I knew that bracket should have been 0. So who knows what I did, why I did it. But thank you for picking up on it. Yes, let's correct that. Alrighty. So completing the square, like I said, I'm going to show you how to do it, or how I do it. If you don't like the way I do it, don't do it the way I do it. Use your teacher's method, use the method you've learned. Like I say, some textbooks really give you step-by-step instructions. I follow 3 steps. That's it. And they're quite easy. The first example, I'm really going to explain everything fully, just so you understand why we do what we do. But from there on out, I'm quick. Okay. So we've corrected that stupid mistake I made. Like I say, sometimes we want the center radius form, and so to do that, we have to complete the square. So it says determine the equation of the following circles in the center radius form. So if we have a look at this first example, we've got x squared minus 4x plus y squared plus 6y equals 51. So the first thing that we always want to do is we want to, I always try to find better words to say this, but whatever. Put the constant on the right-hand side. Now, in this case, that's already done for us. 51 is already on the right-hand side. That's done. The second thing I want to do is I want to group my x squared and x terms, and my y squared in y terms. And then I want to complete the square. And unfortunately for circles, you have to do it twice. You want to complete the square for x and y. Okay, now completing the square, like I say, some textbooks really, I feel, overcomplicate the situation. Once you understand why you do what you do, it's a lot easier to deal with. And I think that's where the confusion comes in. Not a lot of people understand why they are halving, adding the square of that half value. So I'm going to explain it here and hopefully it makes sense. Like I say, if you don't like my method, you don't use it. You use what you've been taught, you use what you're comfortable with. Okay, so step 1's done for us. Step 2, we want to group our terms. So x squared minus 4x plus y squared plus 6y is equal to 51. Notice how I've put a plus sign in the middle of my brackets. We're not multiplying brackets. It's 2 separate terms. Okay, once we've done that, we complete the square. So my little trick is, I think to myself, okay, I know I want to end up with a bracket squared in both of these cases. The bracket squared, when I eventually expand it, should take me back to my x squared minus 4x and my 6 and my y squared plus 6y. That's what I should go back to. So the way for me to get x squared is to say x times x. The way for me to get y squared is to say y times y. So that's the first thing that goes into my brackets. Now I need to decide what my second term of my binomial should be. And this is where the whole half b thing comes in. You quite literally take the coefficient of your x term and of your y term, and you halve it. So half of -4 is -2. Half of +6 is +3. Done. Now, this is, I think, where things get a bit complicated in terms of our understanding of why we're doing what we're doing in our next step. So what I want you guys to remember is the fact that if you are going to introduce this binomial squared, so x minus 2 squared, what that means is you're saying x minus 2 times x minus 2, which gives you a trinomial of x squared minus 4x plus 4. Now, if you go back to what we started with, x squared minus 4x, x squared minus 4x, there it is in the bracket. But now I all of a sudden have an extra plus 4. If I'm going to add 4 on the left-hand side, I have to add 4 on the right-hand side. Yeah, so it's going to fight with me for a second, so that's fine. So if I add 4 on the left, I must add 4 on the right. The same thing is going to be true with the y. So if I take this y situation, I'm saying y plus 3 squared, which is y plus 3 times y plus 3. And so I've got y squared plus 6y plus 9. Again, I already have y squared plus 6y. What I've now added to the situation is a plus 9. So if I'm going to add 9 on the left, I have to add 9 on the right. Let's sort out that situation. And if you think about where this plus 4 and plus 9 has come from, what you are doing is you're taking this value in your bracket and you're squaring it. So 4 has come from -2 squared. 9 has come from 3 squared. That's where the whole minus b over 2 squared thing happens. You've added something on the right, you have to do the same thing on the left. And now you've got your equation of your circle. X minus 2 squared plus y plus 3 squared is equal to 51 plus 4 plus 9 is 64 equals r squared. You know where the center is? Not that I've asked you for it, but you do know where it is. And you know what the radius is. So if you can complete the square, you can gain information about your circle. And again, guys, please don't panic when it comes to completing the square. Just think through it logically. And like I say, follow these 3 steps. That's it. Obviously, completion of the square, you do it the way you're comfortable. But I think it's, I don't know, I think my way is very easy. But You do what you are comfortable with. Sorry, Lumelo, I just got excited and was scrolling. Okay, so there you go. Now you can see everything that I've done. I do apologize that I had cut off the Y part. So what you need to remember with completing the square is by introducing these brackets squared. Let's get a color here going. So by introducing these brackets squared, you are introducing an extra term. That extra term must be accommodated for on the right-hand side. You've added it on the left, you have to add it again on the right to keep your equation balanced. To figure out what you're adding, you literally just take the second term of your binomial and you square it. Minus 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9. That's what you add on the right-hand side. Okay, so for me, that's how I complete the square. I think it's much easier than the way some textbooks show it, but also that's just my opinion, right? My opinion is different to your opinion. You do what works for you. You obviously do not need to show this stuff over here, so that you don't need to show the expansion of the brackets. This is for me, or this is my explanation of why we're doing what we're doing, why we added the 4, why we added the 9. You don't need to show that. If you're really struggling to figure out what you've added on each side, then yes, expand the brackets like I've done, because then you can clearly see what you've added. But like I say, the trick is to just take the constant in the bracket and square it. So I'm not going to do all of this working out for the next one. I'll talk you through it. But like I say, and I think this is why I always hated completing the square. I actually have a textbook somewhere behind me. I remember looking at a textbook, who knows how many years ago, and it had this whole complex thing for completing the square. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to learn this. I don't want to do that. And I had a brain block to it. Once you understand what you're doing, life becomes easier. Okay. So there's just a question of what did I say about finding the +4 and the +9? Okay. So I'm just going to repeat that quickly, guys. Remember, what we have done is we have gone and said, okay, to take or to go from x squared minus 4x to a bracket squared, x times x gives me x squared. And then the trick is I take the coefficient of my x and I halve it. So half of -4 is -2. But if I'm going to have a bracket of x minus 2 squared, so down here in the green, what I need to remember is that when I expand it, I do end up with that x squared minus 4 that I originally started with, but I'm adding another 4, and that's just from foiling. -2 times -2 is +4. So I'm adding a 4 on the left, which means I must add a 4 on the right. The same thing for the y's. I get the y squared minus 6 that I want, but I also added a 9. So I've got to add a 9 on the right-hand side. You don't have to expand to figure out what you are adding on the left and on the right. All you do is you take this constant term in your binomial bracket, constant term in your binomial bracket, and you square it. So that's what I've written in the yellow over here. -2 squared, +4, 3 squared, 9. That's it. So you don't have to do the expansion in order to figure out what you've added or subtracted. Right, I'm going to do the next one and I'll talk you through what I'm doing as well. Hopefully it'll make more sense. If it's still not making sense, just let me know. But let's see. Okay, so first thing I do is I take my constant term over. So actually I'm going to do step 1 and step 2 in the same go. So group my terms. Taking the -5 over to become a +5. Shame, that was a sad looking 5. Okay, now I'm going to complete the square. So step 1 is I know I want brackets squared for both x and y. I take the x squared and the y squared and I reduce it down to just one variable, because when you expand the brackets and you FOIL, you will have x times x, which takes you back to x squared. And then the trick is you take the coefficient of x and y and you halve it. So half of -6 is -3, half of +4 is +2. Now what you do is you take those values and you add the square of them on the other side. So plus -3 squared plus +2 squared. Obviously, if you want to write 9 and 4, that's absolutely fine. But that is what you have introduced on the left-hand side that you must also introduce on the right-hand side. So now we've got our equation x minus 3 squared plus y plus 2 squared is equal to 5 plus 9 plus 4, which is 18. You have the equation of your circle. You know where your center is, 3, negative 2. And you know that your radius is equal to the square root of 18. Okay, so in your brackets, x and y, halve the coefficient of the x term and of the y term, and then you take that number, square it, and add it onto the right-hand side. So everything that I've done here is the explanation that I had in question A. You just don't have to do all of that nonsense that I did. Right, if it's not making sense, obviously just say so, but that's all you do to complete the square. Awesome, I'm glad it's making sense. Okay, again, I know that completing the square is not everyone's favorite thing in the world. I'm fully aware of this fact. So if this method helps you, use it. Okay, remember guys, just because your teacher said one thing doesn't mean you have to do what they've said. Same as just because I've said one thing doesn't mean that you have to do what I've said. As long as it's mathematically correct, you do you. Okay, that's the beauty of maths. There's many different ways to do the same thing. Okay, so if we look at example C, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're not going to panic ourselves. The only thing I now have to realize is that I don't have a y term. I only have a y squared term. But that's fine because we know that that technically means in the bracket we have 0. So there's a couple different ways that you can deal with this. Personally, I'll just leave it as y squared because why complicate things? But I've got x squared minus 6x plus y squared. Some people like to write it as y squared minus 0 and then complete the square. My opinion is why complete the square on something you don't need to complete the square of? Just leave it as y squared. We already know what that means because we spoke about it in the previous 2 examples. Equals -1. Bring the constant over. Great, now I only actually have to complete the square once. Wonderful. X minus 3 squared plus y squared. On the right-hand side, whoops, sorry, -1. Should remember that. I'm now going to take this -3 and add the square of it on the right. And remember, y squared means it passes through 0. Y adds 0 squared, which is 0. There's no point to that. Just don't deal with it. You can, I'm not saying it's wrong, but why? There's no point. So our equation, x minus 3 squared plus y squared is equal to -1 plus 9, which is 8. You know exactly where your center is, 3, 0. And you know your radius is at square root 8. Done. That's it. No overcomplications, no stress, no muss, no fuss. Done. Right, if we look at D, I will make this smaller for you guys to screenshot in a second. And remember, please just ask questions as we go along if something's not making sense. If we look at D, all of a sudden we should be thinking, there's coefficients to my x squared and my y squared. But look at this. Everything's divisible by 2. Don't overcomplicate it. Just divide everything by 2. Make your life easy. So if we divide everything by 2, we've got x squared minus 4x plus y squared minus 3y is equal to 5 over 2. Do not forget to divide that 5 by 2 as well. Remember, basics of equations. What you do on the left, you do on the right.
Ma'am,
Now we come. Oh, yes. Sorry.
why is -4 still -4 if you divide it by 2?
Yes. -2. Thank you very much. So this is what happens when I get excited about completing the square, guys. And Camilo, thank you. I saw your message as well. Okay. So yes, now that I've divided everything by 2 correctly, complete the square. Okay. So x minus 1 squared plus y minus 3 over 2 squared. Okay, so fraction, I'm not really enjoying that life, but it's fine. We can deal with it. And now remember to add what you've added. You're adding a -1 squared, and you are adding a -3 over 2 squared. My grade tells you don't have to do that in your head. You have a calculator for a reason. You type 5 over 2 plus -1 squared plus -3 over 2 squared onto your calculator. Remember your brackets. And you get your answer. I think it's 23 over 4. Be like, yeah, 23 over 4. So x minus 1 squared plus y minus 3 over 2 squared is equal to 23 over 4. You know what the center is. You know what the radius is. Done. So do not let fractions intimidate you. You don't change. You don't change your method. You don't change anything that you're doing. You do it exactly the same. Yes, granted, there's fractions now, but it doesn't change anything that you do. You also have a calculator. So when there are fractions that you need to square, like this negative 3 over 2 squared, you have a calculator. You don't have to do that in your head. I think you all could do it in your head and know it's 9 over 4. But if you can't, again, use your calculator. Okay, so completion of the square is not something to be scared of. It's not something to be intimidated by. Literally just follow those steps and you will get it right. Okay, so let's make that a smidgen smaller. There you go. Whoops. Take a screenshot, and then I'm going to put one up for you guys to try by yourselves. Righty. And again, girls, if you have a method of completion of the square that works better for you, use it. You don't have to use this method. I find this the easiest method, but just because it's what I find easy does not mean it's what you find easy. You do you. Okay. All right, so these are your 2 questions that I'd like you to try. There they are. Just ignore example 4. It's not super important. Determine, and just be careful, here I am asking you specifically for the center and the radius. So you do actually need to go and write down both of those as answers. So I want the coordinates of the center and the length of the radius for these 2 circles that I've given you here. So give it a try. I don't think you need more than 5 minutes. I'm going to give you 3 and then I'll check in and then we'll see where you're at. Hey guys, just give me a thumbs up when you're done. Nice, guys. I like the answers I'm seeing. I'm going to assume 4 thumbs up based on the answers I've gotten. Do we need another minute? Are we good? Nicole, I see you. Nkosi, I see your answer. Ati, I see your thumbs up. Lumelo, I see your answer. We're looking good. Okay, I'll give you 1 more minute and then I'll put up the answer. Okay, guys, let's have a look. Okay, I'm liking the answers I'm seeing though. Right, so first one, nice and, I mean, I don't think either are particularly hard, but obviously if you've got questions, please ask. Complete the square. The radii in both of them aren't very nice because they're surd answers. You're welcome. I personally would just leave it as the simplest surd form. So 2 root 5, root 10, just leave it like that. You can write it as a decimal. It's not wrong. It's just not accurate. So if you were to go and use the radius in further calculations, always use the surd form because that's the most accurate form of your answer. Okay, so the center for the first one, 2, -1, radius 2 root 5, or if you left it a square root 20, that's fine. B, your center is -5, 1, and your radius root 10. So just for A, I'm saying it's fine if you leave it as root 20. We're not like super strict about it. Obviously your teacher might be stricter, especially in like a test or an exam. So always just simplify your answers. But that really is not the end of the world. Okay. To take a screenshot of this, I do just want to do the next example. I'm fully aware of the fact that we've got 3 minutes, but I just want to do the next example so that you can see how we can sort of use the knowledge we have about circles, about completing the square, to answer slightly more complex questions that I think often panic us, but shouldn't. Right, if it hits 7 o'clock and I'm still talking and you need to go, I will not feel offended if you ditch me. It's okay. No offense taken. I should be done by 7. Okay, so this next question, example 4, says, if the radius of a circle defined by x squared minus 2x plus y squared plus 4y minus k equals 0 is 5, determine the value of k. I feel like whenever we see find the value of k and it's in an equation, we panic. It's the same as in functions, trig graphs, analytical geometry. We just panic when it comes to this, but we don't need to. So what we need to realize is that I've actually told you exactly what the radius is. I said, if the radius of the circle is 5, so that means your radius is 5, which means r squared is 25. You have all of that information. You have got the equation of the circle. And we should remember that this minus k is the constant. So it is relating to your radius, because remember the constant goes over onto the right-hand side. The right-hand side is equal to r squared, the radius squared. So negative k, the 5, all of that stuff, they relate to each other. Now, what we need to remember is, in order for us to find information out about our radius, we have to complete the square. So I'm going to have to complete the square here, but we know how to do that. I am going to just sort of do this quickly. You're grouping your x terms, you're grouping your y terms, you're taking the k over. So it's x minus 1 squared plus y plus 2 squared is equal to positive k plus 1 squared plus, or negative 1 squared plus 2 squared. Let's just write all of that again. Plus 2 squared. So the left-hand side, we're not super concerned with anymore because we're working specifically with a radius. But we know that we've got k plus 5 on the right-hand side. Remember again, this right-hand side represents r squared. R squared, we already know because of the information we were given, is 25 because the radius is 5. So all we now do is we take this information that we know relates to each other and we say, okay, cool, this is r squared. And if 25 is also r squared, they're the same thing. We equate them to each other. And so we can get that k is equal to 20. Excuse me. So don't overthink questions like this. Don't overthink what's going on when you're being asked for an unknown variable. Look at your information that you have, see how it relates to one another, and apply the knowledge that you know. Questions like this is based on stuff that you know. We're not trying to like test you on like matrices and differentiation and integrals. No, it's stuff that you know. Okay, so don't overthink it. The k, the constant, relates to r squared. You were given what r is. Use what you have in order to answer that question. Okay, guys, so I'm going to stop there if you want to take a screenshot. Like I say, I'm fully aware now I have gone past 7 o'clock, so I've taken up your time. I appreciate you sticking on. I'm going to just show example 5. If you want to give it a try, please do. The only thing I'm going to say here is it says, what values, okay, will this equation define a circle? A circle is only defined when the r squared value is greater than 0. Why? Well, because a circle must have a radius, otherwise it's just the center point. So there must be a radius value, which means it has to be greater than 0. And so use that information to go and figure out for what value of k the circle would be defined, or it would define a circle. I'll put the answer up at the beginning of Wednesday's lesson, but give it a try if you want. If you don't want to, that's cool too. I'm going to put the answer up anyways, so you'll see it there anyways. Okay, so screenshot. Sorry, guys. Once you have what you need, you're more than welcome to go